Welcome, everyone, to the Dance Floor podcast, where life lessons are learned through the art of dance. I'm your host, Anna Harsh, and today I have an amazing guest with me, Mr. Dale Roberts. He is an author, video content creator, and you might know him from YouTube, from Self-Publishing with Dale. Dale, welcome to the Dance Floor.
I'm just going to tell you this right now, Anna. For some reason, like your voice takes on a different tenor to it. You know what I mean? You have like a beautiful voice, but I'm sorry, I'm showering you with praise before we even finish this podcast.
Please do. Keep going.
Glad to be here.
I've heard that from lots of communications instructors, my professors throughout college and graduate school. They're always like, hey, if you're interested in doing a radio show, I'm like, should I do that forever? Or should I forget this dance thing? But anyway, Dale, I'm so impressed with all of your work, and I can't wait to devour more of your YouTube shows because they are so inspiring and so helpful. As a new writer, I am writing about my dance journey. And so as a new writer, I was so thrilled to see all of your content. So on behalf of all of the watchers and listeners for your YouTube, thank you.
Hey, I appreciate it. That, honestly, it's because of support like yours and other people that I'm able to do this as a living, share information. I always try to tell people I'm like the DJ of self-publishing. I curate all the information. I play the greatest hits for everybody. So that way they can really help move forward. And I think it's amazing that someone such as yourself, you have a legacy that should not end when your life has passed. It should be passed on because this is history, like in the making. And if you don't pass that on, who else is going to do it? And I think it's awesome that you're taking that on, putting out via books as well as through podcasts. So that's very commendable.
Thank you. I'm trying to think of ways to leave. We don't call them footprints. We call them dance prints. I'm trying to leave a little trail of dance prints, and so that somebody else can dance in those footprints and continue on the legacy to other people in the future and the next generation. So that was my goal. And so I was thrilled to see someone like yourself that just cuts through all of the other stuff and goes straight to, listen, this is what you need to know.
Yeah. It's, I think I learned through my own experience breaking into the business in 2014. Then it was a much different world in self-publishing because it was the Wild West. 2008 was when Kindle Direct Publishing had launched, and it was the Wild, Wild West all the way up to about 2015. So when I came into the business, there was a lot of people giving a lot of information. A lot of it was wrong, and a lot of it was misleading. Wow. So all I wanted to do was get it to where I'm like, okay, let me learn this process and then share it with other people. And hopefully it enriches their lives. My intent wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go sell $50,000 in the next day in courses. And, that wasn't my whole end goal on something like that. So yeah, I appreciate the praise. We could go for the next hour and a half giving me praises, I'll tell you.
Well, Dale, I know that not only selling books and podcasts and so many other things that you do and enrich our lives with, but I know were you a fitness instructor? Can you tell us about your fitness journey?
Okay, so this is the wild, unlikely story. And a lot of people will probably see my videos and go, what? This pencil neck geek? So my whole life, I've actually been a reader and somewhat a writer, and probably more recently, the writer end of things. And I've never been athletic ever. I didn't like sports, still really don't like sports. And it wasn't until one day, my brother and I flipping through some channels, and I stumbled on some pro wrestling and immediately fell in love with it. Now, mind you, I grew up in a household where the F word was used with wrestling, fake. And honestly, I never looked at it a second because my mother used to say, don't watch that garbage. It's fake. I kept saying that over and over. And you fast forward to my adult life, I see it. I fall in love with the athleticism, the showmanship, the entertainment value of it.
Right.
And within a year, I fell so much in love with it that I was like, I want to be like those guys on TV. I want to get myself in better shape. So I just consumed it every day, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get better? And I went from 155 pounds soaking wet with bricks in my pocket up to a good solid 200 pounds of solid muscle, 8% body fat. I was doing okay for myself within a year. And then it got me to thinking, by about 2002, I said, why don't I become a pro wrestler? And so I went ahead, enrolled in a local it was called IWA. I think it was the local Fed name. And it was horrible, it was terrible. They didn't know how to train people. But I ended up taking it really, really serious, doubling down on it. 2004, I got a WWF tryout in Louisville, Kentucky at Ohio Valley Wrestling. I wasn't chosen. And then a couple of years later, I moved up to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I learned underneath Lance Storm at the Storm Wrestling Academy. And then for about 2 years solid, I hit the road and started, doing wrestling on a pretty much part-time to full-time basis. But the issue was, a lot of people will know, or maybe they don't, that pro wrestling on the independents outside of larger organizations like WWE it doesn't pay very well. I mean, you get $5 and a hot dog in some instances. So my thought was, every time I saw the different locker rooms, my brain starts working and going, man, these people really want to be in better shape. They just don't have the necessary tools. What if I equip myself with this? And then not like I'm going to show up into a locker room and be like, you're fat, you need to get in shape. Nothing crazy like that. But I thought if I just at least made myself available to the people that wanted it, they would. And it worked out really nicely because and during the daytime, I was a personal trainer at a privately run gym and I was really good at it. I got really good. So in turn, what ends up happening is as wrestlers came into town, they come work out with me, they would pass on, oh, you got to talk to Dale. He's a fantastic guy. He knows what he's, talking about. He's a personal trainer. So then one hand washed the other. Well, you fast forward into about mid 2008 was when the proverbial poo-poo hit the fans because, well, as you can imagine, throwing yourself around and getting beat up on a regular basis for $5 and a hot dog is going to take its toll on you. And unfortunately, my spine was already messed up.
The body can only do so much.
Yeah. And I think you can appreciate this coming from a dance background because it's so funny. And I actually said this to a group of folks that were ballet dancers. And it's a phrase that's said in pro wrestling often when somebody gets hurt, someone says, well, it ain't ballet. And so I said to the ballet dancers, I said to them one time, because I know that they go through grueling things, like it's a murder on their body. And I said, well, do you guys say it ain't pro wrestling when you're talking about the abuse that you take? Right. So there's a little bit of a fun fact. I think a lot of people always hear hey, you're a pro wrestler. Yep. I was a good solid 6'2". I got up to about 220 pounds, about 8% body fat. And then it was about June-ish that I started getting really bad back problems. So much, it was debilitating. I could barely walk. I was in pain 24/7.
Wow.
Come to find out, I'd already had surgery in 2005. And they were like, well, you're going to have surgery again. And I was just I felt like I was on a hamster wheel and I had to make a decision. Do I stay on this road for pro wrestling and possibly, look at my quality of life being absolutely nothing by the time I'm in my 50s or 60s, or do I just go ahead, pack up, call it a day? And I did that. But thankfully, I stayed with the personal training long enough that I was able to really get rewarded for that. And then I was able to circle back into the business I really truly started in when I got out of high school, which was in the healthcare industry, working as an activities director. I was paid to play with senior citizens. So that was a long way of telling you how I got into fitness. But it's been a magnificent journey. Now, to this day, a lot of people will reach out to me. They go, hey, could you write me a program or can you do this? I say, honestly, no, anymore. It's just not my passion anymore. I like to eat healthy and I like to stay fit and exercise, but I know it's a necessity because I have serious spinal issues. Spinal stenosis is one of the biggest issues I have and arthritis. So I can't be well, I'm going to go ahead, skip the next 2 months straight of workouts. Nope. Right. I can make maybe a 1 week before my body starts to say, I've had enough and puts me in severe pain.
Yeah, we do a lot of cross training with my company and with myself. I do a lot of yoga and Pilates. I got certified in both. Nice. I have a Pilates reformer here that I jump on, if I can. Awesome. Every day. So I can appreciate the back pain and all of those, things that you were talking about, because as dancers, we go through a lot of injuries. We go through a lot of pain. We push through sometimes too much, and we have to know when to, hold them and when to fold them. And sometimes we do have to walk away as dancers for a little bit and take care of our bodies and then come back to it. And for me, the pandemic has helped that a little bit. We've all taken a break a little bit, and I've done more yoga just to stay in shape and still rehearse, of course, but not as intense. And so I got a chance to write my book. So, for all of us out there that are struggling as self-published authors, can you give us a couple of tips of, okay, once you get past, okay, you've written the book and you've published it. Can you give us a tip? What's next?
Once you publish it, the real work begins.
Right.
For first-time authors, the hardest part is going to be getting your first book written. As soon as you go to the second book, the third book, the fourth book, it gets easier and easier and easier. With more repetitions, you improve. But the thing that's the hardest part is marketing and promotion. It's not enough that you published a book. Okay, that's fantastic.
Right.
I think a lot of people think, though, as soon as they hit publish, that flocks of fans are going to come over there and devour their stuff. Well, you know what my mom said, or my second cousin's best friend's boyfriend said. That doesn't mean jack squat, because in order for you to be seen by the world, you're going to need to get out there and make yourself available. You need to build that neon sign that points down to you that says, this person's pretty important. Here's why. And that's that book. Marketing and promotion is a never ending task. If you
I knew that from the dance, having my dance company.
Yeah.
Man, it never ends.
Any walk of business, if you really want to be successful and make a substantial living at this, marketing and promotion is the way to go. I mean, here's an example here, just you and I being on this podcast. There's a good reason why I go on to as many podcasts as humanly possible, because it's part of marketing my brand and getting myself out there. Now, I will tell you, this is not something a lot of people realize unless they've watched any of my other interviews, is I am largely an introvert. I force myself to do these things. Now, I will assure you, as soon as I get off this call, typically I'm physically and mentally spent because I'm pushing myself out of my boundaries. My wife can probably agree with you that I am content staying at home doing nothing. So when this whole pandemic broke out, and everybody was just like, yeah, it's self-isolation. I was like, so I just do what I was doing before, but more? Okay, great. No problem. It was not a problem for me, but I do marketing from a standpoint of, it's not just let me do one podcast. Let me do every podcast humanly possible so I can get out as many. And that's just only one area of marketing and promotion.
That's right.
Not a single time have I noted any of the books that I have, or, go get my books, because there's nothing like, nobody likes to be sold to. What they want to hear is that you're delivering value to them. Right. And by delivering that value, they're going to go, oh, you know what? That dude said he was an author. Well, I better go check out his book and see what's going on over there.
Right. Anybody that has traveled the road before you want to know how they did it. How did they succeed? What were their ups and downs? And how can I learn from their story? Mm-hmm. That's what inspires me for sure about people's lives and their stories. How did they get to, plan A or plan B? Did they use other plans before that? So what inspires you, Dale? Like, before you even write or before you do a podcast, what inspires you? I mean, is it a problem that you're trying to solve, or?
Typically my motivation behind what I'm doing is the audience that I'm working with. If I always lead with the audience in mind, then the product will fall into place. The value that I'm delivering will fall into place. I know a lot of people will hear this and it seems rather counterintuitive. Like, hey, go out there and promote yourself, but not too much. Don't try to sell all your books or your courses or your services and things like that. It seems counterintuitive, but if you really embrace this and you just try to chip away at it slowly but surely, it will add up in the long term.
Sometimes I ask students what they want to learn.
Yeah.
Like what is your question, about the industry or about the class, or, and so I think that might be part of the reason how I found you, okay, I need to answer this question. How do I do that? And when I start, Googling everything that was self-publishing, your name kept popping up and I thought, this man has all the answers. I need to know more. So I know you've published so many books and like you said, you have lots of podcasts and things. Mm-hmm. What is the one thing you found through all of your success? What has made you successful? What is that one thing that you would tell another person, say, you know what, this worked for me?
Understanding that consistency is key. You just can't simply expect to do something once and everybody's going to come and flock to you. That's the most important thing, I think. And the other thing is building a system and a workflow that doesn't give you too much of a burden, because I
Right.
think a lot of people will watch my YouTube channel or listen to my podcast and they're going to hear me give a lot of advice, but I don't want everybody to take all that advice and implement it all at once.
Right.
You just take a little bit slowly but surely. So, seeing as how we both come from a fitness background, one of the things you will notice is someone will come to you to fulfill a specific fitness goal of some sort. And you're going to want to make sure that anything they do is trackable. Okay. Hey, I need you to go ahead and you're going to track your diet for the next week so I can see what you're doing. Don't change anything. Don't try to impress me. I want to see exactly what you do. So if you're going to freaking Carl's Jr. and loading up on their tasty fries, which they're really good, then I want to know about it. I say, don't change anything, because what we're changing right now, when I was a personal trainer, was we're adding workouts to this, very meticulous workouts that I would go and craft and make perfect for this person and customize it to their needs. So if they were to go through and try to change everything, like, oh, I'm going to impress Dale with like this great diet and I'm going to take all these supplements. Well, what's working and what isn't working?
Right.
How do you know? Because if you're trying to do all these things all at the same time, you don't know exactly what's creating the change. So this is why I always believe that, hey, implement the workouts, start to adjust your eats. When that starts to stabilize, then we can look into things like supplements, but only one at a time.
Right.
Because we want to see what is.
You can't do it all at the same time. I get a lot of students like that. No, this is my goal and I have to have my leg here today. Well, that's not going to happen today. Let's start with some warm up and stretch. Yeah. So there is a method to our madness, and you have to stay consistent to be successful at anything. One of my recent podcasts, I put my 5 tips that I found that works for me. I want to share them with you and get your take on it.
All right.
The first tip was just make a list. Like, I'm a list girl. I'm an old fashioned, like, I have to write it down. I have to see it visually. So before I started my company, I wrote down everything, like everything I needed to do, everything I needed to learn, anything I needed to, people I needed to contact. I had a list for that.
Yeah.
So the first tip was make a list. And my second tip was surround yourself with experts and people like yourself, or people that knew more than me, which was a lot of people most days. But I try to surround myself with, gosh, I wonder if, Susie Q, I can count on her to tell me how I'm doing or what I can learn more. So surrounding yourself with experts. My third tip was learn a new skill. And I have learned how to sew over the years a little bit here and there. So I make some of the costumes for the companies, which saves money and time. But I've learned how to sew a little bit. So I always tell people, learn a new skill. Just anything. Could be really small. My fourth tip was ask for help. And I know that's hard for a lot of people, just to say, hey, I'm clueless. Help me out here. But ask for help. And my last tip was to have gratitude. Write down what you're grateful for every day. And reflect on it at the end of the year and see how much you've already achieved. And you should see the success in just by having your gratitude written out.
Yeah, these 5 points are just on the money. Surrounding yourself with not just experts, but people that can get behind you and believe in your vision, but also will hold you accountable. They have certain expectations of you. And it's not going to be like, if you're finding yourself surrounded by a bunch of people that are telling you you're doing it wrong, then you're probably not in the right circle.
Correct.
But I think that's such a great idea. And you get it through osmosis. So, I mean, you and I were just even chatting a little bit before we got on here, and I'm sure we just had a value exchange right there. This is something I always try to do. And asking for help is so tough because pride gets in our way. Don't allow pride to slow you down in your growth. There's a good reason. Here's the funny thing. I've interviewed a lot of self-publishing experts over the years, selfishly. You want to know why? I didn't want to pay for consults. Okay. So what better way than to bring them onto my podcast, ask them the questions that I would like to know the answers to. And then everyone learns in the process. So this was one of the ways I was able to ask for help without having to ask for help.
I get it. No, I get it. Dale, we're going to take a really quick commercial break, and when we come back, maybe I'm starting on my speaking engagement tour. I'm sure a lot of authors are too. And I teach for a living. I do a lot of talking, but You've done some speaking engagements. I'm sure they're amazing and brilliant. So maybe when we come back, you can give our listeners a tip or two there. We'll be right back with Dale Roberts. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here talking to self-publishing Dale. You might know him from YouTube. He's amazing. He's an author, writer, public speaker, all-around good guy. Dale, give us some tips about public speaking.
Don't take the advice that you should peer, like you should look at your audience as naked. That's just weird.
I never understood that.
I heard that advice. I'm like, this is just a joke, folks. Don't take that one seriously.
Please, gosh, no.
I think when it comes to the public speaking, for me, I think I'm fortunate with the background of being in wrestling and prior to that being in music, that I've been on stage in some capacity. So I'm comfortable in an audience. And this sounds complete contradiction of what I said before. Yeah, I'm an introvert. Again, it'll take a lot out of me. But with public speaking, I just get up there and I just try to speak in a way like I'm having a conversation with you. There might be 100 people, there might be 400, 500 people, or even more, but I always just try to focus on one person in the audience. Like I'm having a conversation with that specific person. Now, I try not to stare that person down because then they start feeling awkward.
And they're uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, I move around and I try to do that, but that's how I was able to do a lot of the public speaking. And I'm getting better about it because one of the issues is I get really wound up before I get on stage. So sometimes I have to kind of just take like a few seconds to just quietly meditate, get myself centered before I go on stage. So that way, when I speak, I'm not just like sounding like I'm all coked up and no place to go.
Right.
I really need to make sure that I'm speaking in a way that people understand. And they won't be able to do that unless I calm myself down. And I think that's probably has a lot to do with my ADHD because I tend to be very hyperactive if you haven't been able to tell so far.
I do the same thing. I have a quiet moment backstage. If I'm about to perform for dance, I have a quiet moment backstage, or I try to. Sometimes it's a little crazy at outdoor festivals, but I try to find that space where I can just have a moment to myself and just breathe. If I'm doing public speaking, if I'm going to a school or talking to college students, I usually will hold something. It could be a pen or my paper, whatever, just to keep me present. Sometimes your mind can wander and drift of what you're going to do later or what that person is looking at you. So I try to hold something. And somebody told me to hold a paper clip or something that you can fidget with so you can stay present throughout your whole speech. And that works for me. I either hold my paper or my tambourine if I'm talking about our dance company or something like that. I try to keep it active to try to get the audience involved a little bit. So I might teach them something they can do at their chair just to keep it fun, not only for them, but also for me. Like I'm there to have fun. If I'm not having fun, I don't think they are either.
No, they're going to feed off that energy. Obviously,
right.
You don't want to just go fly blindly in this. And something I would recommend is a pattern disrupt. This is something a lot of speakers need to learn a little bit more self-awareness about because they are probably like, ooh, I got to get through this talk. I've got 45 minutes and I need to kind of plow through these things. And you see the audience checking out. There's people flipping through their phones. There's some people falling asleep. So one of the things I try to do is I keep an eye on the audience. I'm trying to read the room. If I don't see someone making eye contact with me when I'm trying to make eye contact, pattern disrupt. I will change that thing really, really quick. This was one that I did last year in Albany, New York. One of the ways I re-engaged the audience, and this drove the cameraman crazy, was I said to them, I got ready to talk about a specific point, and I got the mic in hand, and I'm saying this, and I'm like, I look down there, and I see dudes not making eye contact with me. I was like, hang on, I'm going to give you guys some great insights. I was like, give me just a second. And I crawled down to the edge of the stage, and I sat down. Something is a complete no-no. So, someone in another business is like, that's so unprofessional. But you know what the funny thing is? Everyone got up, and they're like, trying to like see, okay, what's going on here?
What's going on? Where did he go? Right.
And I spoke in a different, delivery. I was a little bit more purposeful and I was a little bit more quiet because then it changed everything. It created this pattern disrupt that made all of the people that were there want to sit up to attention. The funny thing is, after I was done with that talk, they were like, oh my gosh, I really like that one point where you talked about Audible books. And I was like,
now it's memorable.
I was like, when I sat down on the stage and they're like, yep, that was it. They're like, I was like, yeah, the cameramen hated me because they were like, they're like rushing to get all of their static cameras pointing down towards me. I'm sitting on this stage and such. But that's one of the things is try to be aware when you're on stage, read your audience. If they're getting bored, they're getting bored.
Right.
And nothing you say after this point is going to matter. I don't care
Right.
how much of this thing. And this is one of the things I try to tell people when you're speaking in front of an audience, learn the Tennessee walk and talk. The Tennessee walk and talk is something referred into the business of wrestling is when you go out into the ring and you call it out there. You don't plan anything out inside the locker room. It's not, hey, we're going to do A, B, C, D. You're going to throw a punch. I'm going to throw a punch. We're going to go and whip me into the rope, drop down, leapfrog, duck, clothesline. No. You just go out there and you talk it out there because here's the thing is you have an audience that's consuming your product that's in front of you. And if you aren't conscious of what they want, and you give them something that you want instead, and they don't want it, it's going to be a clash and they don't care. And it's a waste of your time. So if they want pizza, deliver pizza. If you happen to show up with salad, you better make that order of pizza really, really quick because otherwise you've just had everybody tune out.
I do a lot of that in choreography too. Like if I'm choreographing a musical, like right now I'm doing 2 different musicals, there might be a part of the musical you're like, man, the audience has to get through this. I might bring them through the audience as a disruptor. Like you said,
Smart.
They're not on stage. They're going to be coming from the back of the theater and everybody's turning their heads.
Yep.
So, I do the same thing when I'm teaching. I might take a moment to drop my voice and just whisper what the next move is. And they're like, they have to pay attention a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. So I do make my audience work for that. That's for sure. So, but that's a great tip. I love that because I do that with choreography a lot. I disrupt the pattern. I don't like predictability when I'm either performing or giving a speech. So
yeah, I think the same thing goes for everybody. It's okay to go out there and perform your best of hits because if it's a smash in one audience, it's probably going to be in another one, and also be ready to improvise, to change things up, to make it a little bit more special for that audience because everybody likes to know that they're getting something customized. That's something for them, something special, creating a moment that they'll forever remember and say, oh man, you remember that crazy guy? Oh man, he was such a spaz. He sat down on the stage. What? Yeah, he sat down on the stage. Doesn't he know you're not supposed to do that? Oh yeah, he even acknowledged it.
Well, Dale, what is next for you? What's your next video or next event going to be?
Oh man, I'm booked so full right now. I know that I'm speaking at 2 different conferences this year, possibly a third.
Beyond Are you still writing? Are you still writing right now?
So this year was the official year that I actually pivoted to fiction. So I have a wealth of nonfiction books at this point. In fact, I'm sitting on another 5 that need to be published.
Wow.
But this year I said, it's been a lifelong dream of mine, a childhood dream that I was going to grow up to become a fiction author. And I finally said, all right, enough, messing around, because I know that at this point of being 45 years old, I'm at that halfway point. So there's going to be years ahead of me that I maybe don't want to be on YouTube or I don't want to be on a camera. And so to me, I think fiction writing is definitely the path to go because I can imagine myself in my 70s and 80s writing fiction stories and making a pretty good living from it.
Yeah, it's always good to look ahead and dream what you want to become.
Yeah.
Well, Dale, when I grow up, I do want to be like you. I want your success. I can't wait to do more products and put things out there that are helpful to others and give them advice so that they can have their path a little bit easier so that it's not so rocky like ours.
You got it.
Dale, leave us with where we can watch all of your amazing YouTube videos. How can we find you?
Super, super simple. If you can't remember any of this stuff, all you got to do is look up self-publishing Dale anywhere. Selfpublishingwithdale.com is the hub for everything. So if you want to see where my podcast is at, where I'm at in social media, all of my books, again, that's selfpublishingwithdale.com. I'm going to say it a third time just so you don't forget selfpublishingwithdale.com.
And I will include it in the podcast notes. Dale, you're amazing, and all of your advice is extremely helpful. So thank you from behalf of all of the new writers out there like myself and the fitness gurus that, had that dream to train and stay healthy and do more with all of your days and nights, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the dance floor. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Anna Harsh. Until next time, keep moving on the dance floor.